of introducing our first guest, Chief Erika Shields. Tasked with recommending a new police chief, the selection committee unanimously chose Erika Shields as their top pick and recommended her to the mayor. Mayor Fisher selected Erika Shields as the chief of police, and she was sworn in on January 19th of this year. Chief Shields has long been an advocate for 21st century policing, with a focus on reducing crime while strengthening trust and collaboration with residents and ensuring accountability among officers. Chief Shields joined the Atlanta Police Department in 1995 as a patrol officer and worked through the ranks to chief over the course of a 25-year career. Committed to developing a culture with technology, innovation, excellence, and transparency in policing, Chief Shields has a track record of reducing violent crime by focusing on known repeat offenders and getting stolen guns off the streets. The department was able to positively impact those communities most affected by violent crime. She firmly believes that to effectively change the trajectory of police work, the underlying drivers of criminal behavior need addressing. While in Atlanta, she partnered with nonprofit agencies on a pre-arrest diversion program that, when appropriate, allowed officers to direct suspects living in extreme poverty or with mental health issues into social services before sending them to jail. She also recognizes the critical nature of engaging the communities that the police serve and is committed to listening and valuing feedback in making decisions. Chief Shields is an active member of the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, NOBLE, and the International Association of Chiefs of Police, IACP. She holds a Bachelor of Arts degrees in International Studies from Webster University and a master's degree in Criminal Justice from St. Leo University. Please give her a warm welcome to the podium, Chief Erika Shields.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm a huge fan of Rotary. It was very much a part of the community I grew up in, and I actually was a Rotary exchange student. So I'm quite familiar with it and have a strong appreciation for the work that you all do. Couple of housekeeping issues. To touch on our previous conversation, I do have pants on, so I don't want there to be any further speculation as we move forward. And then for those of you that got on the call late, I'll defer you to Julie that she can clarify the subject matter, the context. And to John, I have a huge amount of respect for what you do with the zoo. And if I could have warm critters with me on a PowerPoint, I would leverage it as well, but I don't. So allow me to say that it's truly an honor to be the chief of LMPD. And I have had nothing but support from so many sectors of the community on wanting to move the department and the city forward. So yes, there was some discussion when I first came in, which I anticipated, but what I will tell you is the common theme that I have felt through every community, every organization, every individual I've spoken with is a desire for the city to move forward, and in particular to get a handle on the violence. I came in, it was very fortunate, my timing. Two things were presented to me that really were just either starting up or being delivered. One was the GVI, which is Group Violence Intervention. It's based on work of David Kennedy out of John Jay College. And it got its roots a couple of decades ago in Boston when they were trying to tackle gun violence. And it's a very ground level approach to combating gun violence by inserting ourselves as law enforcement in conjunction with outreach workers to those individuals who are on the periphery or just are in some level of involvement, potential involvement with violence. That program was just getting geared up, and I have an enormous amount of faith of it really being able to make an impact in an area we so desperately need. And by that, I mean, police are really good at being called out to handle gun violence, interrupt gun violence. But by the time it reaches us, the conditions under which it's occurring are here. We're called in when things have already escalated. The GVI allows the police, in conjunction with our partners, to enter in when things are still down here. And that means that we can change the trajectory of the lives of individuals, hopefully, by offering them services, non-police services. So that was huge to walk in and have that available, having that been pulled together by the greater LMPD community. The other thing was the Hilliard Heinz report. And I don't know if any of you have taken an hour to read it. It's a very comprehensive and lengthy report. And what they did is Hilliard Heinz did a true top to bottom review of LMPD. And this was fantastic to come into as a chief because it really provided a roadmap of those issues that we're going to need addressing to change the trajectory of LMPD and particularly how it interacts with the community. And the report is so well done. In addition to providing specifics on these areas need improvement or these need addressing, the bigger bang for the buck for me personally was I know that there are issues with the recruiting prior to starting the job. I could see the demographics of the department were not reflective of what the community is that we serve. I knew that there were issues in supervision prior to starting the job. The incidents that occurred, the negative incidents that had been occurring with the cadence that they were, I knew that. I recognized, because I'm a cop and I've done this job and I know how we cut corners, not intentionally, much of the time, it's just a byproduct of doing something and not being called into check. I knew that there was going to be a level of racial profiling going on. Where the Hilliard Heinz report helped me more than anything is it validated my message because it had the data that supported what I was speaking to. And that's huge because when you go out and you're trying to tell folks, not just police, but communities, no, LMPD needs to do this differently. And here's why. That's great. Okay, Erika Shields, the chief, is saying it. Some people, if they agree with me, are going to hear my message. People that don't agree with me won't. And the data meant that I didn't have to expend that energy to convince people, no, that this really is an issue. So moving forward, the question I keep getting asked, what is the priority? What's the first thing? The reality of it is you have to be working on multiple things simultaneously. You cannot think for a minute that you can just plod through and check things off the list. And my task coming in is to ensure that I have the correct commanders, that they understand what our mission is, and we get this moving and we get it moving quickly. So if you want to take into account, let's look at the hiring component. When you hire an employee, it costs roughly $100,000 to recruit, hire, and train an employee. That's before they've worked a day. If we're investing that level of money into individuals, we need to make sure that we are first off hiring people that are going to be good fits for our community. So are we recruiting in areas where we're getting a diverse pool of candidates? Are my recruiters reflective of the people we want to hire? Are people bringing inherent biases to the table? Do you notice on the psychological, there's a disproportionate number of individuals being bumped out who might be Black or female? I've dealt with that. I actually fired a psychologist company in Atlanta. And ironically, it was owned by a Black male, but the person who was doing this clearly was engaging in bias-based behavior, was a white female. So you have to get that granular and you have to know, recognize that every individual has these inherent biases and how can they be impacting our ability to be a better organization. We're going to be a flagship department for law enforcement in the nation. I commit to that. That is, I won't have anything less than that. But that messaging has to get through to people to understand, leave your biases, leave your outdated methods at the door. Let's move forward. So the hiring piece is one component of it. The interacting with the community. Well, what are you going to do with the community? Well, so here's the interesting thing is I think probably you all have picked up on, the community doesn't necessarily agree with one another. All right. It's a microcosm of the United States. So you can't just say, so every community has a different posture that they're sitting in. And my goal is to explain what we're doing, why we're doing it, and how we're going to improve. Obviously, there is a real disconnect between LMPD and the Black community. It is imperative for us to engage with as many individuals and organizations in that community that we can. It is complicated by COVID. You don't have traditional meetings of people in community groups, church events, the things that you could always just show up to and really engage with people on a real, the physical connectivity matters. You can do things over Zoom, but there is a difference. I mean, how many of you have muted the computer and walked away, right? I don't blame you. I'm just saying it's different. And sometimes you just have to reach your arms around someone and give them a hug and let them know that you care. And so for me, what we're doing is we're connecting in many platforms as we can right now. But what I will tell you is for things to change in how the LMPD is received in the Black community, there is not going to be a timetable on that. It's not something that me doing excessive interviews or speaking with groups is going to change. That change will come when we perform in a consistent manner in a fair and equitable fashion in the Black community. We are going to have to remain committed to doing things differently in our minority communities if we're going to change how we're perceived. And that's not something that's just going to happen overnight. It's not something that's you can accomplish it in a significant time, predetermined time period, because this issue has languished for generations. And that goes to the other part of what I'm tasked with. I'm tasked with ensuring that law enforcement understands the history of policing in the Black community. The history of the role of police in the Black community is not favorable, particularly in the South. And when you look and you study history, you see that the individual, the Black marchers who are getting beat with a nightstick were being beat by white cops on horses. The marchers who were getting bitten by German shepherds had handlers, the dogs had handlers who were white police officers. That's not that long ago. And so you have to know, and how is this relevant today? Well, what you'll see is officers are taught about furtive behavior, evasive mannerisms when a person may be engaging in illegal conduct. That's central to our teaching of case law, to watch behavior, tie it to case law, articulate reasonable articulate suspicion, to talk to the person, detain the person. Okay, but here's the problem. That's great if you go in a community where police are respected for their role and they're trusted. But if you go in a Black community and the fundamental trust is not there, and we want to articulate that, well, the Black male averted his eyes from me, turned, walked away, so I had a reasonable suspicion that he was probably engaged in something illegal. No, how about this? He doesn't trust you. He doesn't trust you because our history in that community is awful. And the problem with that is, if you allow that to dictate how you interact, then you get in a foot chase. Then you end up shooting someone. What do we have? What was there? Do we recover anything? Drugs, guns, anything? This was all from an encounter. And this happens over and over and over in the United States. This isn't unique to LMPD. So it's really changing the mindset. And this is where it has to change on so many different fronts, how we approach policing. So that's another huge area that we're grappling with, and we're changing how we training. Again, not unique to LMPD. This is a huge problem for police departments across the country, because police departments across the country have all trained on the platform of case law. And the problem with case law is geared towards what can you or can you not do to be found not guilty, to not be tried in court. Yet the reality of it is I'm an employer. The goal is that we don't even ever get to court. So what do you need to do differently? What do you need to do differently on the front end to ensure that there is a different outcome on the back end? So that's another thing that we're working on. You know, here's what I will say to you has been, I came in and I think my biggest concern was, I don't know if the officers will want to police because of what the last year has presented them. And that's not just unique to Louisville. That's through many agencies across the country, especially ones who had any sort of pronounced civil unrest. I have been pleasantly thrilled to find in every corner where I have talked to police and met with police, they want to work. They want to do the job. They want to be respected. They're open to doing things differently. They just want to be told, what should we do? So that's huge, because when you look at the violence that is occurring, there is a direct correlation between the police having been and still are in, to a large degree, a reactive posture and the violence you're seeing. There's a chart that was put out by Corrections, and what it shows is in 2019, maybe late summer 2019, LMPD apparently had a series of poor interactions as a result of traffic stops, questionable traffic stops. As a result, you saw productivity, self-initiated activity come to a screeching halt. In the chart, what you can see is the self-initiated activity goes down, crime goes up. It's that clear. After a few months, it levels off kind of where you would expect it. And then you have Diane Taylor and the unrest throughout the rest of the year. Self-initiated activity goes down and crime goes up. So we're still in this mode. You have to police to deter crime. If you're not proactive, you're not going to deter crime. You might solve it, but you're not going to prevent it. So the key is, for me, ensuring that the troops understand, I want you to work. I support you working, but this is how we're going to do it. My focus is very singular. I want illegal guns off the street. Illegal guns are tied to repeat convicted violent felons all day long. When you go and you focus on through intelligence-led policing means you know this individual is tied to violent crime. You know this. They've been charged. You've got a record. You start looking at that person's network. Who are their associates? Who are they also engaging with crime with? It is very focused. When you start focusing on those specific individuals who are driving violent gun crime in this city, you disrupt it. And it's very doable, but you have to be very deliberate in how you police. You can't just go say, well, I'm going to do 7,000 traffic stops and hopefully we get something in it. Or we're just going to stop everybody who goes into that convenience store or loiters out that convenience store. You might get criminal charges, but you're not going to disrupt violent crime. And the reality of it is the individuals who drive violent crime set the tone for a neighborhood. You have to get that removed. So my job is to ensure the officers understand this is our focus. This is how we're going about it. And once that messaging gets through and there's a level of comfort from the officers that understand, you will be supported in doing your job, but you need to do the job in the manner you were trained. Then we'll be in a space that we can really start making inroads on stopping some of the violence that's already out there. And then layer that in with the GVI program, which I have huge hopes for. I feel that we can really drive change. So I don't know how much time I have, and I want to leave time for questions. I could talk about policing all day. I love it. Yeah, So I don't want to go over my time.
Okay, well, we'll go ahead and start with a question. We have one from Angela Bailey, and she says, I'm hearing much about recruiting struggles for new officers. What are your recruiting and retention strategies?
So recruitment is a huge problem across the United States, small to large agencies. That's the first thing you have to be familiar with. This is because as a profession, it's not a desirable profession right now. We've had one ugly incident after another. And then even beyond that, you look at the job and what's being asked of employees. I mean, it's not, the reality of it is we have to do things differently and rebrand policing so it's appealing. So that's what's important to know. This is not unique to LMPD by any stretch of the imagination. So the important thing is to first show a level of stability and investment in our existing employees. Where agencies get off cue, I think, and I dealt with this in Atlanta, you need to ensure that you are providing a platform and a work environment that people want to be committed to. It takes several years before you get an officer that really is proficient in policing. And if you've spent and invested that money, and I told you it's $100,000 before they've even worked a day, you cannot lose that employee to a surrounding agency for $10,000. And my push here and my task here is to ensure that LMPD becomes the highest paid agency in the state. They have to be. It's the largest agency, it's the busiest agency, and the job is most dangerous. And the problem is, if you don't do that, you do end up with the attrition and you lose people $10,000, $15,000. But that is only one part of it. It's also messaging to the employees, check this out. Yeah, I'll go to bat for you, but you are going to be held accountable and you're going to do this job properly. But to reel that back in a bit, we have to have targeted recruitment. It's, are we going to universities that have strong criminal justice programs? Are we familiar with the professors and the deans, and are we presenting ourselves in a favorable manner? Are we going to the churches? Churches have congregations that have, I can't tell you how many ministers I've had come to me saying they had people that wanted to be police. And and I'm like, where are we? What are we doing here? Are we recruiting properly? So again, recruitment in itself is in a whole nother hour block of instruction. But I think what's important to note is this is not unique to LMPD by any stretch. My job immediately is to shore up getting people leaving, because I don't want them leaving because of morale. That's the primary thing.
Right. Have you unmuted Roland? Could you ask your question? No. Okay, thank you. Ask your question, please.
Yes, I'm very concerned reading recently that this police officer who framed a few people, is just getting off with a 1-year sentence. Is there anything the police department can or will do to assure that this doesn't happen again? So
he's referencing a case that I just was reading about, and it's shocking, and it goes back a couple of decades, I believe. It may have just come to light now. I was shocked to see not only was a year, but that initially I believe the prosecutors felt it was appropriate to ask for probation. When those sentences like that are handed out, it does myself and my peers no good. It's outrageous. To answer your question more directly, do we have influence over that? No, I have no more influence over that than the fact that you've got judges out there who give people signature bond for murder. And this is no different than what I ran into in Atlanta. And it takes a lot of effort. And I will eventually, once we start to get a cadence in reining in violent crime, you will start to see that be my podium speech. People have to understand and familiarize themselves with all of the components of the criminal justice system. What tends to happen is they look at police and they gauge crime by what police are doing. No, you need to know who's prosecuting crime, how many cases they're prosecuting, how many weeks a year a judge is working. Are they mandating plead outs with the attorneys? is corrections, letting people out because they've got to deal with the judges to keep the jail population down. So we're going to put felons back on the street. It's really important for the public, the caring public, to understand all of the components of the criminal justice system so that each entity answers for it. I'm with you. I thought that sentence recommendation and what it's going to be is sickening, quite frankly.
Thank you for that. Dan, have you unmuted? Dan Hartledge?
Yes, I have. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Chief Shields, thanks for being here, and thanks for coming to Louisville. We appreciate that. I know you've got a lot going on. I used to hear a lot that most of our murders in this city were connected to drugs, and therefore we needed to address the illegal drug trafficking to address the murders. But I've heard you say recently, and I think I've heard the mayor say recently, that illegal guns is the issue. So I guess my question is, how much of the violent crime in this city is drug related? Mm-hmm. And would stopping the illegal gun trade stop those crimes?
So, and that's a very fair question. For years, especially during the height of the crack epidemic, you would see a number of shootings that were tied to drugs. And you're still going to see that on occasion, certainly. And this is where our partnership with the federal task forces is so critical, because they do focus on the pipeline, the drug shipments. And that's huge, because the reality of it is us getting a small quantity off of a user is not going to change the crime dynamic in Louisville. The work we do with our federal partners has really created some strong results. And so I think it's important to note that you don't turn away from drugs and you don't say it's okay. It's just, how do you go about it? What you find on the guns is you've bought the gun legally, you own it. Georgia and Kentucky are very similar. It's almost a requirement to have a gun. You can walk around with assault rifles, have a good time. I'm not looking to lobby. My job is not a politician. I need to rein in crime. But what my messaging to constituents was, to be a responsible gun owner, I need you to secure that gun. And that means when you go into the gym, when you go in the supermarket, you reach over your shoulder, you put in a lockbox that's affixed to your car because they have a cable. I've got one in my personal car. It costs about $60 or $80, and you secure your weapon. And what you find is the guns that are on the street were bought legally, they weren't secured, and now they've entered the illegal market. So there's an educational component to the legal gun owner to say, I need you to take responsibility for your weapons. On by focusing on the guns, here's the different result that you get. If you're focusing on people tied to violent crime, not only are you knowing that you're going after the individual committing violence, but you will get drugs with it, because they do tend to go hand in hand. But I will also tell you what is an aberration, I would say, in this last year in many cities, and there's a direct correlation to COVID for sure. People don't have anything to do. So if you're already living on the margins and your only hope is school, your only hope is the community center, and you have nothing to do, it's just been, and I understand why these entities had to shut down. I get it. I'm not looking for teachers to lose their lives and students, but the result has been, we have seen so many shootings and killings, a direct result of nothing other than an argument. Relatively few feel like they've been tied to drugs. And so that it's really just been an anomaly, and it can't end soon enough.
Thank you. We have time for one last question, and Alice, go ahead.
Chief Shields, thanks for being here today. Really appreciate you as a change agent in our community. Nationwide, it feels like police unions have taken a confrontational approach to working toward reform, including our own River City FOP. What can we do to bring these police unions to the table to work collectively with, especially the Black community, to make change?
Yeah, it's It was just, that was the one thing I will say that I came into that was discouraging. And it was not that there's a union. I don't have a problem with that. And I think actually newer officers really do need the representation because there's just so many loopholes. But the fact that the collective bargaining agreement has allowed unions to dictate and influence operations to the extent they have is a very real problem. And I'll just take the post that was put out by the union, you know, at 1 a.m, making a snide remark about the Civilian Review Board appointees. What does that accomplish? They're still appointees. All you've done is you've just, you know, you've gotten a few thumbs up from your cronies, but the negative that you have incurred by being just stupid has further alienated us from not just the Black community, but people who are questioning how we perform. And who's going to be at risk for that? It's going to be the cop doing the traffic stop alone on a side street. You're not representing the cop when that's your decision making. The difficulty is much of the unionization and the boundaries and the power that it has is afforded through the Kentucky State Legislature. So it's not something that I can change, that the mayor can change. What I see is that the laws around the unions in Kentucky really seem to have been developed in a time when agencies were small or were developed to serve small agencies. It certainly is not forward thinking, and it certainly is not geared towards someone who's trying to run a large agency. It is probably going to be my biggest challenge here. And I'm not looking to blow it up. I'm just saying, can we get with the 21st century? And oh, by the way, I'm trying to run a large agency. And I'm not really sure. I'm not quite sure how we're going to get there, quite frankly.
You mentioned the Police Review Board, and we're very proud. We have 2 Rotarians on that. We have Denise Sears and Turney Berry. So we're really happy to have them on that. And just thank you again for addressing our club today. We recognize the absolute essential importance of public safety for our economic vitality for our region. And we recognize the important role you are leading as police chief. So we greatly appreciate your dedication and your service. And please come back anytime. We'd love to have you.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. And I hope John's PowerPoint is good, but not great. How's that?
Thank you again, Chief. We appreciate it.
All right.
And he will be introducing our special featured speaker. John?
Thanks, Julie. It's certainly my pleasure to introduce our speaker today. He's not only, as Ken Grossman pointed out, one of our longtime highest rated speakers, but he's also one of our own, which makes it even more special. John Walczak began his zoo career at the Palm Beach Zoo after graduating from Penn State University in 1978. He then worked as a supervisor at the Oklahoma City Zoo for several years before coming to Louisville in 1985 to design and build the Herp Aquarium and curate the Ecotherm department. After managing more than $30 million in zoo expansion, John was named director of the Louisville Zoo in 2004. As director, John led the successful design and accomplishment of the $26 million Glacier Run capital campaign that funded exhibit openings from 2006 to 2013, growing the zoo's business through the recession with more than 900,000 guests in 2012. That same year, Glacier Run earned the highest award of the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, Exhibit of the Year. The Louisville Zoo was likewise awarded the association's 2013 Significant Achievement Award for Excellence in Education, earned as a result of the School at the Zoo program. John has served on many local boards, including the Partnership for Creative Economies, the Arts and Cultural Attractions Council, and Indiana University Southeast. He's very active in the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, having served on the Ethics Boards and Accreditation Commission, as well as having recently completed his term on the AZA Board of Directors. John has been a Rotarian since 2004, and he is passionate about pursuing the zoo's mission in serving our community. He believes that it is imperative for the zoo to engage people through amazing experience with the animals ambassadors as a way to impart our roles in advocacy for living in better balance with our planet's ecosystem. The actions we take impact not only the global environmental health, but also the health of ourselves, our children, and the animals who share the planet with us. Please welcome John Walczak to the podium.
Thank you, John. I really appreciate that. And I guess I need to update my my resume to also state that I've been on the Rotary Board. But a great honor, and I really appreciate that wonderful introduction. So I want to tell you a little bit about the zoo. This is, of course, the passion of my work, passion of my life. And I usually have animals that upstage me with these presentations. Ken was talking earlier that the presentations are always great. Mac McClure always says it's because he brings live animals, and there's a lot to be said for that. So hopefully you'll enjoy the presentation. Can you all see the screen that I'm sharing? All right, excellent. So our mission is bettering the bond between people and our planet. And it is something that all of our staff, it really motivates them. That is why they've taken these jobs. They love what we do. I want to tell you a little bit about the heart of our mission, and the heart of what we do is making memories. So much of what we do, especially going through this last year, we know the stresses that we've all been through with the pandemic, the social distress. It's a place where people need to be able to come and catch their breath, enjoy their families, and make great memories. And speaking of which, a little bit of promotion. We have a Rotary event. I understand it's going to be our first in-person Rotary gathering since the pandemic began. So on May 14th at 6:30, there'll be a gathering, a social hour, and a dinner at the zoo so you all can enjoy wild lights. The photos that you see are some of the displays from last year and of this year of wild lights at the zoo. There's over 60,000 LED bulbs lighting up these incredible sculptures, which are made by our partner in China. It's called Tianyu Exhibits. They're absolutely gorgeous. There'll be a dinner at 7:15, and then the Wild Lights journey begins at 8:15. I would encourage you to take your time. When you come, it's a very zen event, and the darker it gets, the better it gets. So I hope you could join all the other Rotarians with us here at the zoo. It's $55 per person. It includes the dinner, the Wild Lights journey, and there will be golf carts since we'll be having it up at the Oasis tent. It'll be undercover, but an outdoor tent. But it is up on a hill, so we'll have the golf cart to take everybody back and forth. So as I mentioned earlier, the Wild Lights are going on right now. We'll have them here through May 30th, and people are really, really enjoying it. Some folks are coming early, and I keep telling everybody, take your time and stay late, because you really want to see this during the darkness. The music, the environment, the lanterns are absolutely fantastic. And when they leave in May, we're going to do as quick as possible reset of the stage, and then we're going to be bringing animatronic dinosaurs to the zoo. So they'll be coming in late June, June 19th. So the Wild Lights will leave the end of May, May 30th, and then we'll have to take this exhibit out. When we brought it to Louisville last year, we actually brought it in right when the pandemic was starting to become apparent in this country. So we had 45 Chinese nationals come into Louisville the day before President Trump put in the international travel ban. So we were able to get it set up. We were open for 1 week, and then we had to shut it down, but we were able to reopen in July and August. This year, the entire event was set up by 4 of the artists. So we had 45 people setting it up. This year, we had 45 last year and just 4 this year setting this all up. Some other things going on at the zoo that help with that heart of the mission, because we really want to make sure that we are accessible to everybody. You all recall 2 years ago, my last presentation to you was about the potential privatization of the zoo. And the zoo is being looked at for-profit operation. And the decision was made not to pursue that, because what you might have expected was going to happen, prices would go up and accessibility would go down. One of the new business ventures that we have that I'm really, really proud of is last year when we reopened, we created the Community Access Pass, which is a membership for any family that is on the SNAP program, the Food SNAP program. And this membership provides a 64% discount. So for $50, a family can get this membership and come and enjoy their zoo versus a typical family membership for $139. I just want to take a little tangent here to talk about one of the things I discovered with this pass. I'm also on the Rotary Community Impact Committee. and our work with racial equity. And I'm very proud of this community access pass, but through our work there, I've taken a program the United Way offers, which is called a racial wealth gap analysis. And it's a great program. We're looking at doing it for that committee and the Rotary in the future. But one of the things that I learned, and I had no idea, is that people that have been convicted of a felony are not allowed to get food stamps, which I find absolutely absurd, because we have these folks, it's tough for them to come out and get a job. And then we're telling them, well, we're not going to feed you either or help you get food. So as Chief Shields was saying, there's not a lot of alternatives left for those folks when they try and re-enter the mainstream of life. So I'm thrilled with our community access pass, but I found that yet there's another hurdle that we need to undertake as a society. Another thing that we've instituted this last year, we are also, of course, running a business. And through that whole privatization effort, we've always run the zoo like a business. We typically fund 70 to 85% of our own way. We're fortunate to be a Metro agency and get funding from Metro, but the majority of our funding is self-generated revenue. And this last year, we instituted dynamic pricing. We did that in July. And what dynamic pricing is, it's the same thing as buying theater tickets. If you've been to a Broadway show or the Center for Performing Arts, if you go to the Saturday performance at 8 p.m., you're going to pay a lot more than you would for a Monday afternoon matinee. This works the same way for the zoo. Our admission prices are cheaper on a Monday or a Tuesday than they are on a Saturday or a Sunday. And by instituting dynamic pricing, our per capita gate admissions have gone up 20%. So this is something that's really going to benefit your zoo for many generations to come and help us meet our bottom line. President Julie was very nice to announce a few meetings ago that I've announced my retirement from the zoo, which is also why I've been asked to present. So I thought first of all, I want to thank everybody for all their congratulations. Everybody's been so kind in their remarks about my career. And I'm showing this slide of the Herpetoria because that was my first project here at the zoo, to come and design it, staff it, and bring all the animals in. And it's been wonderful getting all of these great compliments, but it's a team effort. It's a community effort to make the zoo that we have today. So in the past, I've talked about exhibits, I've talked about our metrics and financials, talked about the business and the privatization and other topics, but I want to talk a little bit about what we do in terms of the people that make it happen. We've got a great team out here. They're so dedicated, from the folks that are volunteering, like our youth board. You see them in the bottom of the slide. They do sand art and face painting. Of course, those are on hold right now for the pandemic. And they also make donations to the zoo's capital projects. And this group of youth, which are 13 to 18 years old, have donated over $60,000 to the zoo to help build exhibits since they've been functioning for the last 20 years. And we have a great group of young seasonal staff that come out and they're cashiers, they clean the zoo, they set up the zoo for events, they'll be helping set up the Rotary event. And they are truly a great group of young people, and they love what they do. And they also make good use of their career here to pursue their lifetime profession. This gentleman, Mark Zoller, started at the zoo as a landscape laborer. He actually came to us from one of the big landscape companies in town, and the CEO of that company is a good friend of mine. And he told Mark, well, you're just going to not succeed there. You're basically just going to be in one position for the rest of your life. Well, Mark, he's a great person. He had several promotions. He eventually became the assistant director at our zoo, and now he's the director of Metro's fleets and facilities. This is Chris Sight. He started, his very first job was at the Louisville Zoo. And he drove the train, he drove the tram, he was a cashier, he became a lead person with the seasonal crew. And now he's a director of civic innovation and technology. He is the head IT person for all of Metro government. You may know this fella, Councilman Patrick Mulvihill. His first job, he was a cashier at the zoo. He was selling tickets for the elephant and camel ride, and now he's one of our councilmen. I will like to mention that with Chief Shields' presentation, we also have several of our staff that are now police officers, and have done really well with the police force. The zoo also creates rock stars. You may know this fellow, Jim Olagus, also known as Jim James of My Morning Jacket. One of his first jobs, he was also a cashier at the zoo, and worked in guest services. So amazing people that go on to do amazing things. And I'd like to believe the zoo is part of their career foundation. Well, you know, you've heard me talk about the heart, and the heart is why you all come to the zoo. It's a place to release from the pressures of every day. And when you're here, we'd like to talk about the soul of our mission, which is conservation education. This is Guy Graves. Guy and I in Hawley, Colorado, getting ready to release the 1,000th black-footed ferret that was reproduced at your zoo. This is the most endangered mammal in North America, and your zoo has reproduced more than any zoo in the world. Now, Guy Graves, Guy came to us as a seasonal, and he was actually here for the first Halloween at the zoo. He was the person that opened the front gate. We expected to get a couple hundred guests. If you remember when that happened, that was right after the Tylenol tragedy. And we were overwhelmed. We had over 3,500 people come to the zoo, and Guy was literally pushed back with the gate and crushed into the wall as he opened the zoo for everybody to enjoy Halloween. Well, Guy went on to get his BS degree at Purdue in veterinary sciences, and he has an MBA from Webster University. But this person he exemplifies the dedication of our team with all those credentials, and we know that he could have been very financially successful with his MBA. But instead of pursuing that business potential, he decided to dedicate his career to being the species survival plan coordinator for the black-footed ferret at a salary of $39,000 a year. He worked at the zoo for 31 years to make sure that this species, which was down to 11 left on the planet, is now being reintroduced to the prairies of the United States. Some of you that are long-time Rotarians will recognize this guy, my predecessor, Dr. Bill Foster. Bill lives in infamy in the Galt House where we used to have our meetings. I understand he is the only person to ever have brought a camel through the kitchen of the Galt House for a Rotary presentation. We don't do that today, but Bill actually did that. He brought a camel in for a Rotary presentation. But Bill gets full credit for bringing that black-footed ferret program to Louisville. It was his vision, and it's our flagship conservation effort. And I can't thank Bill enough for what he's done. By the way, he's retired in Lexington. And if any of you want to get in touch with him, just let me know. This is Bill Mcmahon, and he's working with the Cuban crocodile. Bill is our current curator of ectotherms. I actually hired him, and he became my predecessor in the Herp Aquarium. The Cuban crocodile is the most endangered crocodile in the world. They are actually probably not going to make it. They are probably going to become extinct because what's happening with this species, they're a freshwater crocodile and an incredibly robust species. They're kind of the pit bull of the crocodile family. They're the only crocodile that lifts their entire body and tail off the ground to walk. Most of them kind of drag their bodies along. What's happening with them is as Cuba develops, such as like we're developing our coastal areas, the canal systems are allowing brackish water to enter into the freshwater systems of inland Cuba, which is allowing the American crocodile, a different species, to come further and further inland to the Cuban crocodile's habitat. It's hybridizing with the Cuban crocodile, and it's overwhelming the species, and eventually the Cuban crocodile will be absorbed into the American crocodile species and will no longer exist. The American crocodile will, but this species will be gone. Now we're still working to try and prevent that. And to let you know a little bit about Bill, when he took this project on in 1990, Americans were not going to Cuba regularly. So to do his conservation work, he really wanted to be prepared. Bill couldn't swim, so he took swimming lessons. Bill didn't speak Spanish, so he took crash courses in learning how to speak Spanish. He paid for his trips to Cuba out of pocket. We were able to pay his time there, but we couldn't afford to pay him his travel expenses and other expenses. He even took a crash course in martial arts because he didn't know how an American would be received in Cuba. And he's made lifelong friends. The two gentlemen to his left and right are known as El Jefe Cocodilla of Cuba, and they're still his friends today. Some more of the folks at the zoo. You see Emily Goldstein and Sam Least. These are teens that grew up at the zoo. And they've won an award from Polar Bears International, and it's called the Arctic Ambassador Award. Their work, they worked with Dr. Sheldon Berman when he was a superintendent of schools at JCPS, and they got JCPS to turn all their computers off at night, which saved tons of CO2 entering the atmosphere. So they received that award. Steve Taylor, the gentleman on the camel, is our Assistant Director of Conservation and Collections. And he does a great job. He's actually been very focal in our research work on cortisol studies with all the species at the zoo. We have been studying cortisol, which is a stress indicator for all of us throughout the animal collection. And a lot of the work we're doing right now, we're learning how to take the cortisol out of the hair follicles of polar bears so we can start detecting stress of polar bears in the remnant wild of the Arctic. And the person in the photo beneath Steve in the plaid shirt is Dr. Brent White from Center College, who's been conducting those behavioral research studies here for over 35 years. The keeper with Dr. White is Sylvia Zirkelbach, and she's been working with, it's a monkey that's on that surgical table, and they suffer hypertension. Sylvia's been at the zoo now 39 years, and she said she's only going to retire when we have our last woolly monkey. The woolly monkeys from the United States were sent to Louisville, all of them, because we had the most successful program. And the plan was basically to manage this population and learn from them, but not to propagate and expand it. So we're now down to our final two. We've sent other reproductive animals to Europe for their programs, but Sylvia is going to stay with these two until their time comes to pass on. The reason for that, why are we not doing more work with the woolly monkeys, is because, like all businesses, time, space, and money. And we manage these species internationally. So the decision was made that the woolly monkeys, not enough was known about them. We've studied their hypertension. We've actually been able to extend their lives into geriatric years, but zoos have had to move on to other New World primate species to try and keep those populations going. So your zoo has the last two woolly monkeys in North America. Steve Taylor, too, just a quick note on him to show you his dedication. Some of you, if you were in Louisville in 1994, you might remember Snowmageddon, the great snow of 1994, where our town came to a halt. Well, we got no media attention during that time, but the zoo is an essential service. We have to show up to work every single day. And on that day, we had 11 people show up to take care of the animals. Steve Taylor walked in from J-Town. He walked in from J-Town to work with the animals that day. He stopped along the way. A Courier Journal truck offered to give him a ride. But the deal was he had to help the Courier Journals go to a stranded truck and offload newspapers onto this truck. So he loaded newspapers that morning. Then he got on the new Courier Journal truck, which went up the road and got stuck again. So Steve had to leave the truck and walk all the way into the zoo. And the next several days really were a lot of hard physical work for us both. Our volunteers, can't say enough about them. We have over 65,000 volunteer hours here at the zoo every year. And the young lady that you see in the photo at the top is Diane Taylor. Diane Taylor has a tremendous story. She was a welfare mom living in Bardstown and didn't even know there was a zoo in Kentucky. Well, she got on here through the CETA program back during the Carter administration, and she was hired as a receptionist. Diane had two children and was barely making ends meet. And she is an incredibly motivated and skilled person. And she coordinates that volunteer effort, one of the most successful volunteer efforts in our region. And you see her here now with our youth board, who is doing such great work helping us raise funds. And Diane, she actually retired and came back. So she's now been at the zoo for over 40 years, helping young folks and volunteers make your zoo the success that it is today. Conservation is the soul of what we do. This is Marcel Gianaloni. You see her here, she's standing next to a fountain in the Havana Zoo. Our work with the Cuban crocodiles, Marcel was a species survival plan education advisor. So she, along with Bill, made several trips to Cuba throughout the 90s to help them promote educational programs to save the Cuban crocodile, this endangered species, save them from extinction. Well, the photo that you're seeing, if you look to the right, that's Marcel when she was 11 years old at that same fountain in Havana, Cuba. She actually was born and raised in Cuba, and she left Cuba during the revolution, came to this country. So you can just imagine the emotional impact for her to go back to the country of her roots. and help with the species and get to reunite with people that she grew up with and just had such a strong cultural association. Marcel's retired from the zoo now for several years, but you see that she's staying there with Mayor Fisher, myself, and the head of the AZA, or Association of Zoos and Aquariums, because she created a program called School at the Zoo, an award-winning program where we work with thanks, Julie, with the underserved schools throughout the community. 80% of those schools are Title I schools with the free lunch program, and the success of those students coming out to the zoo and actually spending a week at the zoo, an entire week learning core curriculum, their test scores, their CAT scores just all went up. And Marcel created that, and I can't thank her enough. It truly takes a team to serve the mission. And we've been very innovative and fortunate that we've created AZA's top award-winning exhibits with islands. The African Outpost was awarded by the Kentucky Architects Association. Gorilla Forest, Glacier Run are both award winners from the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, winning top honors amongst exhibits from around the world. These exhibits, the years they opened, were the best in the world, not just in Louisville, Kentucky, but the best in the world. And of course, Snow Leopard Passage and Colobus Crossing have just opened up in recent years. And in this photograph is a young Rotarian. The gentleman on the left, and these are students from Emmett Field School, and they're raising money for animals at the zoo when the zoo didn't exist yet. And that gentleman on the left is Arnie Judd, our very own Arnie Judd, who we've worked with for over 25 years in creating these world-class exhibits. And Arnie, I can't thank him enough. He's just been an incredible contributor and so dedicated to the zoo. Our education starts young. As John mentioned at the beginning of the program, we work to try and help everybody understand their role in planetary balance. Folks, fellow Rotarians, in my lifetime, the population of the planet has tripled. Think about that for a minute. It's tripled. Think about that in terms of our own health in a pandemic and how much easier it is for a disease to spread from China to the United States. There's 3 times the amount of human beings that were here 65 years ago. So we need to think about the limited resources on this planet, and we can't start young enough. Our current programs, we have to shout out to PNC for helping us with programs to fund preschool education, to get young children to value wildlife, to value wild places, and have a bugs club. These are students at our camps coming out in the summertime to learn about nature and to help instill those values of bettering the bond between people and the planet. And you never know, one of these young campers someday may be the next director of your zoo. I really want to thank you for the opportunity to present to you today. And if there's time for questions, I'll be happy to answer them. But thank you for everything that you all do, you Rotarians. I am always admire and am humbled by your incredible efforts to make Louisville the very best community and the world a better place for all of our international efforts. So thank you so much for letting me speak to you again today.
John, it was just outstanding, and you inspire us all. We do have time for a quick question, and Greg, if you would go ahead and ask your question, Greg Braun.
Hey, John, you know, you had such an incredible career, and on behalf of the club, thank you for all you've done for the club, hosting events. In your long career, what's been your most favorite project? What do you remember most, or what will you take away as your crowning jewel?
Well, it's I probably the Herp Aquarium and Gorilla Forest are some of the projects I'm most proud of. Glacier Run, yeah, it's, you know, Greg, I'm often asked, what's my favorite species? And you know what my answer to that is human beings. You know, because we have these great frontal lobe, huge brains to help steward and take the best care of our planet. And that's why I think human beings are my favorite species. Plus, when you try and pick your favorite animal or your favorite project, it's like saying, who's your favorite child? It's just too hard to pick.
Good enough.
Thank you.
John, you're having an outpouring of love fest actually right here in chat. So I hope you'll take some time to see these beautiful comments and how much people have really appreciated you. And as Tony Coffey says, you're truly a community treasure. We really appreciate your great service, the enjoyment and education you provided. So appreciated. And there's many more here. So on behalf of the entire club, just thank you so very, very much. And he whispered in my ear and told me he's going to stay with Rotary even when he retires. So we'll be with John for a long time. And again, thank you so, so very much.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you, everyone.
Well, as we're closing, I just want to say happy birthday to the Rotarians celebrating birthdays this week. Their names are featured in Sparks. And as Rotary International recognized April as Maternal Child Health Month, we're pleased that Rotarian Dr. Bob Hilgers, chair of the International Committee, will host next week's pre-meeting, providing an update on cervical initiative of his cervical cancer project in Haiti, aimed at saving mothers. And our guest speaker will be Sadiqa Reynolds, president and CEO of the Louisville Urban League. And I just want to thank everyone for an outstanding meeting and for being with us today. Be well, be safe, and happy Easter, everybody. Happy spring. We are adjourned.